I rested my hands on the wheel and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The house stood quietly before us, sunlight brushing its windows like a promise that had been waiting patiently to be kept. It wasn't the grandest estate in the kingdom, not the kind that people would whisper, but to me it felt more powerful than any palace I had ever lived in, because this place was not about ceremony or crowns. It was about us. I turned to him, my heart beating louder than the engine ever had, and whispered the words I had practiced in my mind 100 times. Your new home is waiting. Let's go, sweetheart. I wanted to sound confident, unshaken, like a woman certain of her future. But beneath my calm voice lived 1,000 memories that refused to stay quiet. This was supposed to be our beginning again. A clean page after years of ink that had bled through, after words written in pain and silence and regret. We had survived storms that should have broken us, nights where the space between us felt colder than any winter wind, days when love felt less like comfort and more like a battlefield where neither of us knew how to stop fighting. And yet, here we were, still together, still choosing each other, standing before a door that promised something softer, something kinder. I watched his face as he looked at the house, the way his eyes carried hope he was trying not to let spill over. He had worked so hard for this moment, I knew that. Every late night, every sacrifice, every quiet apology spoken without words. This home was not just wood and stone to him. It was his proof that we could move forward, that the past did not have to define the rest of our lives. And part of me wanted to leap from the car, to run toward that door and throw it open, to fill the rooms with laughter immediately just to prove to both of us that everything would be all right. But my body would not move. Fear has a strange way of holding you still. It wraps itself around your chest so gently that you don't realize you can't breathe until the air is already gone. My fingers twisted together in my lap, betraying everything my smile tried to hide. I was afraid not of the house, but of hope itself, afraid that if I believed too fully, if I let myself dream again, the fall would hurt more than before. We had tried to start over once already. We had promised then too, and when things cracked again, it felt like losing the same thing twice, which somehow hurt more than the first time. He noticed, of course. He always did, even when he pretended not to. His voice softened when he asked if I was all right. And that softness nearly undid me. Because how do you explain to the person you love that the future they are offering terrifies you? How do you admit that happiness feels fragile in your hands, like something you're afraid to touch because it might shatter? I forced a smile. The kind women of my station are trained to perfect, but my eyes betrayed me. The truth sat heavy between us, unspoken and undeniable. This was not just about the house. This was about whether I believed in us enough to step inside it. I thought about everything we had been through. The nights spent staring at opposite walls, pretending sleep would come. The words said in anger that lingered long after apologies were spoken. The moments when love felt like work rather than refuge. I had questioned myself more times than I could count. Questioned whether loving him meant losing pieces of myself, questioned whether staying was bravery or fear disguised as loyalty. And yet, every time I imagined walking away for good, my chest ached in a way that told me the answer before my mind could argue. When he reached for my hand, I felt how steady he was trying to be for both of us. His thumb brushed my skin, grounding me in the present moment instead of the past that kept pulling at my thoughts. He asked me to talk to him, not as a prince or protector, but as the man who had shared my deepest joys and ugliest fears. The words I had been holding back finally found their way out, trembling and honest. What if we can't do this? What if we ruin this too? Saying it aloud made it real, and once it was real, I couldn't pretend anymore. I expected disappointment in his eyes, maybe frustration, maybe even exhaustion. After all, how many times can two people promise to try again before the promise itself starts to feel thin? But instead, I saw understanding, not pity, not anger, understanding. He knew that fear intimately too. He had worn it differently, hidden it beneath action and planning and determination, but it lived in him just the same. He didn't dismiss my worry or try to drown it in reassurance. He simply told me the truth as he saw it, that we would never know unless we tried, that a fresh start is not magic, but a choice you make every day, even on the days when it's hard. I listened, my heart aching with the weight of his sincerity. This home, he said, was our chance. Not a guarantee, not a solution, but an opportunity. A place where we could build something new with the lessons we had learned instead of pretending those lessons didn't exist. He told me he needed me to walk through that door with him, not because he couldn't do it alone, but because he didn't want to. And something inside me shifted. Because love, I realized, is not about being fearless. It's about choosing someone even when you are afraid. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. For a moment, the world held its breath. I wondered if this would be the moment I said no. The moment fear finally won. The moment I chose safety over possibility. I imagined him standing there alone, holding a dream meant for two, and the thought hurt more than the risk of trying again ever could. I wiped my face, took a breath that felt like stepping off a cliff, and nodded, not the polite nod of obligation, but a real one, full of intention. When I whispered okay, let's go home, the word home felt different than it ever had before. As we stepped out of the car together, my hand in his, I felt the ground beneath my feet as if for the first time. This was not a palace with guards and expectations and history pressing in from every wall. This was a place where we could simply be human together, where love did not have to perform, where mistakes could be acknowledged instead of hidden. The door opened easily, as if it had been waiting for us, and light poured into the entryway, warm and inviting. Inside, the rooms were empty, but they did not feel hollow. They felt ready to hold conversations that lasted late into the night, ready to witness arguments that ended in understanding instead of silence, ready to echo with laughter, with music, with the quiet comfort of two people who choose each other again and again. I could already imagine mornings where sunlight found us tangled together, evenings where exhaustion melted into shared peace. The future stretched before us, uncertain but alive, and for the first time in a long while, uncertainty did not feel like an enemy. I thought about who I had been raised to be. A princess taught to lead, to endure, to sacrifice personal happiness for duty. Love had never been part of the plan in the way it found me. It had arrived unannounced, complicated and imperfect, asking more of me than any crown ever had. Loving him had stripped me of my armor, forced me to confront parts of myself I would have preferred to ignore. But it had also taught me resilience, humility, and the courage to choose vulnerability over pride. Standing there, I understood that this home symbolized something deeper than starting over. It symbolized forgiveness, not just of him, but of myself. Forgiveness for staying when it was hard. Forgiveness for doubting when I was scared. Forgiveness for believing that love should be easy when in truth, the most meaningful things rarely are. I squeezed his hand, feeling gratitude rise alongside fear, and realized that both could exist together. This was our choice, not made once, but continually, and as I crossed that threshold, I knew that whatever awaited us beyond it, we would face it not as two people haunted by what had been, but as two people brave enough to build what could be. We stepped further into the house, the floorboards creaking softly under our weight as if whispering encouragement. The air smelled faintly of wood and possibility, a scent that seemed to promise the life we had dreamed of together. I glanced at him, seeing how he carried both hope and a quiet fear in the way he stood, shoulders squared yet hesitant, like he too carried the weight of everything we had survived. I wanted to tell him that it was okay to be afraid, that love did not demand perfection, that all we needed was the courage to try together. But my voice trembled slightly even as I said it out loud, because love, I realized, was never simple, and courage never came without fear. Each room we passed seemed to breathe with potential. I imagined our mornings here, sunlight spilling through the windows as we shared quiet coffee, laughter dancing off the walls, small conversations that felt monumental because they were ours. I pictured evenings curled up on a sofa we had yet to buy, talking in low tones about everything and nothing, our voices mingling with the soft hum of life settling around us. These rooms had never known us before, but now they would. We would fill them with memories, some bright and some painful, all belonging to us, and that thought made my chest ache in the best way. I noticed him watching me closely, as if reading every twitch of my fingers, every flicker of hesitation in my eyes. His gaze was patient, steady, filled with a reassurance I couldn't put into words. It reminded me of every quiet moment we had shared when words weren't enough. His patience had saved me more times than I could count, more times than I had admitted even to myself. I reached out, brushing my fingers against his, feeling the warmth that made fear shrink just a little. "We'll make this ours," I whispered, not just to him, but to myself as well, a promise to step forward even when the past called me backward. We moved into the largest room, which would one day be our living space. Empty as it was, it already felt alive. I imagined a fire crackling in the hearth, his hand brushing mine across the table, the quiet moments between us filled with trust instead of tension. I thought of every fight we had survived, every tear we had shared, every silence that had once felt like distance now feeling like a bridge. I could see him smiling at me, a little nervously, his eyes reflecting the same hope that made my heart feel both fragile and strong at once. I realized then that this home was more than a building. It was a reflection of us. Every wall, every corner, every window would carry the story of who we were and who we were becoming. The mistakes we had made would not vanish, but they would become part of the foundation rather than chains. We were stepping into something new, not erasing the past, but learning from it, transforming it into a place where love could thrive instead of fear. The thought made me shiver with anticipation, a thrilling combination of fear and desire, hope and vulnerability. He reached for my hand again, and I felt the subtle difference in pressure, the reassurance that he too was committed to this step. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, and I knew the question was more than about entering a house. It was about whether we were ready to face everything together, to allow ourselves to hope without guarantees, to trust each other enough to risk failure. I nodded, letting my hand squeeze his in response, letting my heart speak what my voice could not. "I am," I said, and the word felt like a key unlocking something inside me that had been dormant for far too long. As we moved through the smaller rooms, imagining bedrooms and studies and little corners that would hold our shared life, I felt a sense of ownership, not of the house, but of our future. This was ours to shape, to protect, to love. Each step we took felt like a stitch weaving the two of us closer together, binding the present with the past in a tapestry neither of us could have imagined alone. I glanced at him often, catching the flicker of emotion in his eyes that mirrored my own. There was excitement, yes, but there was also fear, a recognition that this was not a guarantee, only an opportunity, and that we had to take it together. I thought about the nights when he had held me while I cried silently, when the weight of doubt had seemed too heavy to bear, when I had feared we might never find our way back. And yet here he was, standing beside me, patient and steadfast, offering his heart and expecting mine in return. I realized then that love was not measured by ease or certainty, but by the willingness to show up even when fear was loudest. And I wanted to show up. I wanted to be brave enough to meet him halfway, to trust that we could build a life stronger than any obstacle we had faced. In the kitchen, I paused, imagining the smells of meals we would cook together, the laughter spilling into the dining area, the quiet comfort of mundane routines made sacred simply by sharing them. I could see him bustling around, attempting to impress me with a dish I would inevitably correct with a smile, his eyes lighting up when he saw me laugh. These small visions filled me with warmth, a hope that felt almost tangible. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt that the future was not a threat but an invitation. He lingered near the window, looking out over what would eventually be a garden. I followed his gaze and saw the potential. The sunlight catching the leaves of the trees, the promise of flowers blooming in the spring, the quiet corners where we could sit and speak without interruptions. I imagined us planting together, the dirt under our fingernails, laughter mixing with dirt, stained hands, a metaphor for growth and care and shared effort. Every image made me more certain that this was the right path, that fear could coexist with love if we chose it together. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill me as if to steady the fluttering in my chest. I realized that every hesitation I had carried until this moment was simply a reflection of the depth of my care. To truly love someone is to recognize how precious and fragile that connection is, how easily it could be damaged, and how fiercely one must protect it. And here I was, standing beside him, ready to protect and nurture what we had, ready to build something lasting from the fragments of our past mistakes. He turned to me, his eyes catching the light, and I felt the familiar pull in my heart that had drawn me to him from the beginning. I wanted to tell him everything, the fear, the hope, the gratitude, the determination, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, I simply took his hand again, lacing my fingers with his, letting the gesture speak for the feelings that felt too big to contain. It was enough, I realized, because he understood. He always did. In the study, I ran my fingers along the empty shelves, imagining the books we would collect together, the letters we would write, the quiet hours spent reading side by side. I pictured late nights, when we would whisper dreams to each other, our words floating in the warm lamplight, building trust and intimacy stronger than any fear. The thought made me smile softly, a quiet reassurance that this was the right choice, that choosing to love again was worth every risk we had ever faced. Every room carried a different weight, and different possibility. In the smallest corner, I imagined us hiding secrets, little notes left for each other, reminders of affection that would last through years. In the hallways, I pictured laughter echoing, our voices blending in harmony, filling spaces that had never known life before. Each imagined moment made the house feel less like a structure and more like a living testament to our decision to face fear together, to embrace love despite uncertainty. I thought again of the nights when we had almost given up, when silence had threatened to grow into distance, when I had feared we might not survive the weight of our past. And yet here we were, standing hand in hand in a house that symbolized not just a beginning, but the courage it had taken to choose each other once more. Every step felt like a commitment, every glance a renewal, every shared breath a promise that we were ready to try, to grow, to trust, to love. His hand tightened around mine, and I knew he felt the same things I did: fear, yes, but also exhilaration, hope, and an unwavering desire to be together. We were not perfect, nor were we unscarred, but we were willing to step forward together, to face the unknown with courage, and to build a life that reflected not just who we had been, but who we wanted to become. I realized then that this home, this moment, this choice, was more than a physical space. It was the embodiment of trust, forgiveness, patience, and hope. It was a promise we made not only to each other but to ourselves, that despite the pain of the past, despite the uncertainty of the future, we would choose to be present, to love, to fight, and to grow together. I pressed my forehead gently against his shoulder, feeling his steady heartbeat, and whispered once more, "Your new home is waiting. Let's go, sweetheart," not because the house needed my approval, but because I wanted him to feel, as I did, that this was the right path. He smiled softly, a mix of relief and love in his eyes, and I knew that in this moment, all the fear, all the doubt, all the hesitation had been met with courage, and that was more powerful than anything else we could have hoped for. We stood together in the center of the house, letting the quiet settle around us. It was empty now, but not for long. Our voices, our laughter, our small arguments, our whispered dreams, all of it would fill this place. Every room would remember us, every corner would bear witness to our choice, every window would reflect our shared vision of a future built on trust and love. I realized that we were not just entering a house, we were stepping into a new life, one we would shape with care and intention, one we would protect with all we had learned. We moved deeper into the house, our hands still entwined, hearts beating in tandem as if each step forward affirmed our decision. Every room seemed to hold the weight of possibility, the echoes of what could be, of the life we were choosing together. I let my eyes wander across the empty walls, envisioning them adorned with moments that had yet to happen, laughter spilling from the living room, The quiet hum of music drifting from the study, the soft glow of evening lamps casting shadows across our shared sanctuary. This house was more than walls and ceilings. It was a canvas for our future, and we were both artists hesitant yet determined to paint it with love. In the corner of what would become our bedroom, I lingered, imagining the softness of the sheets, the way sunlight would filter through the curtains in the morning, casting warm golden hues across the floor. I imagined him beside me, peaceful and unguarded, and my chest tightened with the overwhelming desire to protect this peace, to nurture the bond that had brought us here. Every hesitation, every fear, every scar we carried from our past seemed suddenly small compared to the enormity of this moment. The moment when two hearts choose to start again, to build anew from the fragments of what once was more profound than any challenge we had faced before. I looked at him, tracing the lines of his face with my gaze. The way his jaw tensed slightly as he surveyed the rooms, the glimmer of hope in his eyes mingling with the remnants of doubt that he had carried like a quiet shadow. I wanted to tell him that it was okay, that together we could withstand uncertainty, that love was not defined by perfection but by commitment, by presence, by the willingness to remain even when fear whispered that leaving might be easier. Yet words seemed insufficient to capture the depth of what I felt. Instead, I let my hand squeeze his, letting my touch convey the certainty I could not yet speak aloud. We entered the kitchen, the heart of the home, and I could almost feel the warmth of imagined mornings already unfolding. I pictured the aroma of fresh bread, coffee steaming in delicate cups, our voices mingling with the quiet rhythm of domesticity. There would be arguments, undoubtedly, small and large, but the thought of navigating them together, of facing every frustration hand in hand, filled me with a courage I hadn't known I possessed. I realized that love was not about avoiding difficulty, but embracing it together, about transforming ordinary spaces into vessels of intimacy and understanding. He followed me to the windows overlooking the yard, where sunlight bathed the garden in soft gold. I pictured us planting flowers, nurturing growth not just in soil but in our lives. Every bloom would mark a moment of patience, every seed a testament to hope. I imagined evenings spent beneath the trees, quiet conversations carried by the wind, laughter echoing as the world continued beyond our sanctuary. The thought filled me with a serenity I had long sought, a promise that no matter what storms had come before, we could create something resilient, beautiful, and ours. I felt a tremor in my chest, a mingling of fear and exhilaration. For so long, we had existed in the shadow of doubt, of unspoken worries and past mistakes. And now, standing on the threshold of this new life, the enormity of choice pressed against me, fierce and exhilarating. To step forward was to admit vulnerability, to lay down the armor that had protected me for so long. Yet in his presence, with his hand in mine and his gaze steady, the fear did not feel paralyzing. It felt like an invitation to trust, to hope, to step boldly into what could be rather than retreat into what had been. I moved through the hallways, imagining them filled with traces of our days, footprints on the wooden floors, the subtle echo of our conversations, the quiet warmth of companionship. I envisioned shelves lined with books we would read together, letters exchanged in laughter and secrecy, memories both monumental and mundane stitched into the fabric of the home. Each imagined moment strengthened the belief that what we were building was worth the risks, worth the fears, worth every hesitation that had brought us to this threshold. He stopped at the staircase, and I watched him for a long moment. The stairs, winding and unadorned, were symbolic in their simplicity, a reminder that even the smallest steps mattered, that progress was not measured only in leaps but in the willingness to continue upward despite uncertainty. I reached for his hand again, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steady rhythm of reassurance beneath my fingertips. Every step forward, I whispered, "Ours, together." He looked at me then, eyes softening, lips curving into a small, tentative smile that mirrored my own swelling hope. In the upper rooms, I imagined quiet evenings and mornings filled with the mundane beauty of life shared. I envisioned moments when we would argue softly, apologize quickly, and return to each other with laughter as our reconciliation. I pictured mornings spent in lingering embrace, afternoons scattered with reading and writing, the simple pleasure of presence that made ordinary days extraordinary. Every imagined detail made the house feel less like an empty structure and more like a vessel for our shared life, filled with the imprints of love and patience. I paused in the largest upstairs room, imagining it as our sanctuary from the world, a place where we could retreat when life became overwhelming, where intimacy and honesty would reign. I could feel the weight of responsibility not as a burden but as a privilege. The privilege to care for him, to be seen by him, to nurture the bond that had endured so many storms. I realized that every fear I had held, every doubt that had gnawed at my confidence, was now tempered by the certainty that we had chosen each other once more. We walked to the balcony, where the view stretched over the garden, the horizon softened by the late afternoon sun. I imagined nights spent here, speaking softly about hopes and dreams, fears and secrets, the vastness of the sky reminding us that our love could be boundless if we chose it to be. I turned to him, tracing the outline of his profile in the golden light, and felt the familiar pull that had drawn me to him from the beginning. In that moment, words seemed unnecessary. Our joined hands, our steady presence beside each other, spoke volumes more than any phrase ever could. I realized then that love was not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it together. Every hesitation, every trembling moment, every uncertainty that had lingered in the spaces between us was no longer a barrier. Instead, it became a testament to our resilience, a reminder of the depth of care we carried for one another. And in that realization, I felt the first true weightlessness I had known in years, the sense that no matter what the future held, we were ready to face it, hand in hand, heart with heart. We moved back into the central hall, the sunlight fading and shadows lengthening across the floors. I looked at him, noticing the subtle shift in his demeanor, the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, the faint curve of relief and anticipation in his smile. I felt my chest swell with gratitude for his patience, his steadfastness, and the quiet courage that had brought us both to this point. This was more than a house. It was a declaration, a commitment, a living testament to our choice to keep loving despite the past, despite uncertainty, despite fear. I pressed my forehead gently against his arm, inhaling the subtle warmth that always seemed to anchor me, and whispered, "Your new home is waiting, let's go, sweetheart." The words carried more than promise, they carried intention, acknowledgement, and the weight of every decision we had made to arrive at this moment. He responded with a soft squeeze of my hand, and I knew that in that simple gesture, the world had aligned. Fear did not vanish, but it was contained, held in place by trust, love, and shared courage. We walked through each room one last time, allowing ourselves to imagine life fully lived within these walls. I could see future arguments and reconciliations, quiet mornings and chaotic afternoons, laughter and tears mingling seamlessly into the fabric of our shared existence. Every imagined scene reinforced the certainty that we were making the right choice, not because the house guaranteed happiness, but because we were choosing each other again, fully and intentionally. As evening approached, the house seemed to glow with a warmth that was both physical and emotional. The light through the windows painted golden paths across the floors, guiding us forward, urging us to step fully into what we had begun. I felt a thrill of anticipation, mingled with the lingering tremor of fear, as if every nerve in my body recognized the magnitude of this moment. Yet in his presence, I felt anchored, supported, ready. I turned to him, eyes reflecting the fading sunlight, and saw the same mixture of hope and apprehension mirrored there. It reminded me that love is not unilateral, it is a collaboration, a daily choice to remain open, patient, and courageous. I let my hand squeeze his once more, offering reassurance, gratitude, and an unspoken promise that whatever challenges awaited us, we would meet them together. Finally, we stood at the doorway that had first welcomed us into this space, the threshold between the past and the future. I felt a sense of reverence, a quiet awe at the journey we had traveled to arrive here. Every step, every fear confronted, every tear shed, every moment of patience had led us to this point. I pressed my hand against his, inhaled deeply, and whispered with full certainty, "Okay, let's go home, your new home is waiting. Let's go, sweetheart." We crossed the threshold together, hearts aligned, breathing in unison, stepping fully into a life we had chosen. The house embraced us, empty but ready, awaiting the imprint of our laughter, our love, and our shared presence. It was not merely a home, but a living testament to resilience, hope, and the courage to love despite all odds. In that moment, I understood that the past no longer dictated our future. It had simply prepared us for the love we were willing to claim today. Hand in hand, we began to fill the empty rooms with our presence, our choices, our laughter, and our whispered promises. This was our beginning, our chance, our commitment, and I knew, without question, that we would walk this path together, shaping every corner of this home with love, patience, and courage. The journey ahead would not be easy, but with him by my side, every challenge would be met with resilience, every fear would be faced, every moment cherished, and every day would be an opportunity to prove that love, when chosen deliberately and bravely, can become the foundation of everything we dream of and everything we are.